Good evening. Good evening. It is Wednesday. This is your Wednesday workout, and this is Happy Hips Part 2. So if you joined me on Monday, I did some hip exercises standing up. Today's is lying down on the floor. If you don't have much space on the floor or you struggle to get down onto the floor, some of these exercises you could do on your bed. I will be doing some on all fours, which might not be great on your bed, but you can give it a go if you want to. I'm going to be doing quite a wide selection of exercises. Good evening. So I'm going to be doing various bits and pieces. I'm going to start off lying down on my back, doing some mobility and a little bit of strength. I'm going to do side lying exercises. I'm going to do some on all fours, some on my front, and then more side lying exercises. So all sorts of exciting things. I'm giving you a quite wide range. So it might be quite long. So if it's too much, if it starts to hurt too much, then please stop, pause and come back to it at another time. I just want to show you lots of different options of doing things in different positions, so that you can choose what suits you and what feels comfortable for you. So I'm really going to be focusing on the hips again. If you do have dodgy knees, some of these exercises are great for those as well, although possibly not the ones on all fours. That might not be great. Hi, good evening, Elizabeth. So anyway, if you have got a band of some description, that will be useful, but it doesn't matter if you haven't. So I'm going to add the band into a couple of the exercises. So that's that. If you haven't, don't worry. So yeah, let's start, shall we? And then see how you feel. If it gets too much, you can. Hello. Excellent. Hello. How are you? Happy? Oh, how lovely. Okay, let me start then. So I'm going to be really focusing on the hips. So I'm just going to do some nice mobility exercises to warm up the hips, the joints, and the muscles around your joints. And as I said on Monday, these are suitable if you've got arthritis of the hip, if you've got, they're really useful, but if you haven't, it's absolutely fine. If you've got issues with your hips, they're great, but if you haven't, it's still really good for you. So let me get on. So I'm just going to start off with a nice neutral Pilates posture. You're on your back, your feet are hip distance apart facing forwards, and your knees are nice and parallel. Try to relax your pelvis down so it's nice and flat. I'm going to do some little pelvic tilts in a minute. I'm not going to worry too much about doing this very specifically, but just try to make sure that your hip bones and your pubic bones are in a nice and level, in a nice flat triangle. Your ribs are relaxed down, your shoulders are relaxed, your arms are relaxed, your neck is nice and long. Obviously I'm looking this way, but you'll be hopefully with a nice and long neck. You might be looking to the side as well. And of course, with Pilates, you are lifting up your pelvic floor as if you're imagining yourself stopping yourself up in a wee, and you're tightening up your tummy, you're squeezing in those tummy muscles. I'm not really working too much on the core today because I'm really focusing on the hips, and I wanted to make things nice and simple for hip issues. So I'm not really going to be focusing loads on the core, but if you can tighten up your tummy muscles and lift up your pelvic floor, that would be great. And also don't forget to breathe. Don't worry when you breathe, really. Breathing in through your nose and blowing out through your mouth is best, but whatever works for you. So without further ado, let's get on. So pelvic tilts to start with. So you're going to just tilt your pelvis forwards and backwards. So you're going to sink the small of your back down into the floor and then tilt it the other way so your tailbone relaxes down onto the floor. So your pelvis is like a bowl of soup. You're tilting it forwards and backwards. If you imagine you've got a marble in on your tummy and you're rolling it up towards your belly button and then rolling it down towards your pubic bone, that is your basic pelvic tilt. So we're just going to get the joints around your hips warmed up. And these are very similar movements to the ones I did standing up, just obviously lying down. So that's your pelvic tilt. You're just getting the spine moving a little bit, getting the pelvis moving a little bit, and whatever's comfortable. Try to keep your knees still. And try to then come to rest in a middle position so that, as I said, it's nice and flat. So that's nice and simple. Okay, single leg slides. Breathing into the pair as you breathe out, slide one foot away along the floor. As you breathe in, you're sliding it back. So you can do this as slowly as you want to. Breathing out as you slide the other foot away and breathing in as you slide it back. So it's, again, this is very gentle to start with. We're just warming up. very, very straightforward and easy. So if it gets a bit boring for you, you can catch up in a little while when it gets more exciting. So whilst you're doing this, you're keeping your pelvis nice and still, your hip bones are pinned down to the floor, tummy's tight, pelvic floor is lifted. The knee that you're not moving is staying nice and still, straight up towards the ceiling, and that's it really. So that's a single leg slide, just warming up the knee, warming up the hip joints a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to do a single knee fold. So you're going to breathe in, as you breathe out, lifting up one knee, breathe in, as you breathe out, you're putting it back down. And then the other leg, breathe in, breathe out to lift it up, breathe in, breathe out to relax it back down. So as I said, don't worry too much about the breathing as long as you're not holding your breath, because I'm just doing very, very basic, simple stuff here, just a simple warm-up to warm up the joints. So you've got a right angle behind your knee, your other knee's nice and still, you're squeezing in your tummy, lifting up your pelvic floor, but it's all nice and easy. I'm not even going to do double knee folds today. I'll save that for another day when we're working more on the core. So this is just a single knee fold just to get the joints going. Okay, then I'm going to do a single hip jog. So your feet and knees are together. You can take your arms out to the side if it's comfortable. Breathe in, as you breathe out, one knee's going out to the side, so opening up the hip. Breathe in as you breathe out, coming back. And then the other side. So one knee's going out to the side, the other knee is staying straight up towards the ceiling, not moving at all. With Pilates, often it's the keeping still the bits that aren't doing the work that's harder than the actual movement that you're doing. So to keep your pelvis nice and still, keep the hip bones pinned to the floor and keep this knee nice and straight up towards the ceiling, not wobbling, is sometimes harder than the actual movement. So it doesn't matter how far out your knee goes, it depends on the flexibility that you've got in your hip. So even if your knee can only move a little bit, that's okay. Just do whatever is comfortable for you. I'm quite flexible, so my knee can go quite a way over, but make sure that you don't take your knee over so far that it makes your pelvis tilt. Keep those hip bones pinned down to the floor, if you can. So just opening up the hip, getting some movement, some mobility in the hip joint there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those two exercises together. So I'm going to do a single knee fold and then a single hip drop at the top, open up the hip. Take it back to the middle and put it back down. Single knee fold, single hip drop out to the side, take it back to the middle and down. So again, it's quite boring to repeat. The knee that's not moving is staying still, you're not letting it wobble about. The hips are staying still, the pelvis is staying still, the hip bones are pinned to the floor. It's just the hip that's moving, the hip joint that's moving to really get that warmed up. And again, it doesn't matter how far you can take it, just do what is comfortable for you. Don't hurt yourself. If anything hurts, then you need to stop. If you squeeze your tummy in, it will be better. And you'll have more control over your pelvis. But again, this is these are all very, very basic movements just to get you warmed up. Okay, so I'm going to do a hip circle. We did this standing up. It's a bit tricky lying down, but we can do it. So the knees bent, and we're going to do a little circle with the hips. Now it's even more difficult doing a circle to keep the pelvis still, so you've got to work quite hard to not let that wobble. This knee's still, pelvis is still, don't forget to breathe, don't forget to squeeze the tummy in, circles in one direction, and then I'm going to do the other foot. So I'm doing circles outwards to start with, because I think they're a little bit easier. So I'm doing hip circles going outwards, shoulders are relaxed, ribs are relaxed, pelvic floor's lifted and tummy squeezed in. So then I'm going to do the hip circles going the other way. So I just did outwards, I'm going to do inwards. That's quite tricky. So internal rotation there. And again, as big or as small as you want to make them. If there's tiny little circles, that's okay. Better to do very small ones, but keep everything controlled than to let everything wobble about. And you're doing big ones, but the rest of you is wobbling about. There's no control there. You need to keep the movements as small as they need to be. So the other leg I'm doing I forgot which one I'm doing, internal, so inward circles. These are quite tricky. So we've done all of those movements just to get the joints, the hip joint moving, the knees and the hips warmed up, and the pelvis and the spine a little bit warm. Okay, so then we're going to make it a little bit harder. Now, if you've got a band, grab the band, but it doesn't matter if you haven't, you can do it without. So I'm going to put the band around my right foot, and I'm going to do a single leg raise. So you can start with the foot on the floor, lifting up the pelvic floor, squeezing in the tummy. Hold the band as tight as you want to. All you're going to do is lift and lower this leg. Now you're keeping this leg nice and straight. Exactly the same movements that we did standing up on Monday, but it's quite nice because you're lying down and just balance. So the other knee is nice and still. You could take these higher if you wanted to tighten up the band more, take them higher. Or you could keep them down to the floor nice and low. Actually, if they're lower, they work your core muscles a little bit more. It's up to you, whatever works for you. Again, you're keeping the pelvis still. You can do them as slowly as you want to. Usually with Pilates, the slower you do something, the harder it is. If you want to work harder, make it slower. You will feel your hip working now. I'm feeling this muscle at the front, the hip flexor, working quite hard. Obviously have a rest if it gets too much. So that's a single leg raise, just lifting and lowering that leg. We're working the thigh, we're working the hip flexor muscle as well, quite hard. So the other leg, wrap the band around your left foot. It's exactly the same if you do it without the band. It's just that you haven't got the resistance, and also you might be working a little bit harder because you've got to lift it up. You don't have the band to help you, so I like it with and without. So take your pick. How you do it. So again, you could have them bigger if you wanted to, all the way up to the top for more movement, more range of movement if that's comfortable, and a bit of a stretch down the back of your leg, or you could keep them nice and low. Keep this knee still, keep the pelvis flat, keep the tummy tight, and don't forget to breathe. Okay, so that's again very, very simple, and when you've done enough of those, you will feel it working the front of your hip here, the hip flexor muscle. Okay, so then we're going to do this, exactly the same thing but circles. So, and around with the right foot again, circles. Now this is a bit trickier to keep everything still. So, same thing, legs nice and low, you're going to do little circles. The leg is nice and straight, the movement is coming from your hip, so you're not letting your knee bend at all. This knee's nice and still again. There's harder options for these that work your core more, but today I wanted to really focus on the hips, so I didn't want to really bring in complicated, tough stuff for the core, so that's why I'm just doing very basic stuff. So then we can go back the other way. Now, the other thing that you can do with a circle, you can keep it low down, it's working quite hard here, or you can make it higher if you want to. Now, when the leg is higher, I think it's harder to keep this knee still. You can make the circles bigger if you want to, as long as you can keep the pelvis still, because again, there's no point in doing great big circles and everything else is wobbling about. You're not really doing the work then. You need to keep it controlled within a range of movements that works for you. So the pelvis is staying flat on the floor. I can feel mine wobbling, so it's quite hard to keep it still. Circles in one direction and back the other way. Obviously, you'll have noticed when I'm talking, I don't remember how many of anything I've done, so if you find that you've done loads more on one side than the other, then please take no notice of me and do what works for you. You might want to count 10 or however many. I'll do the other side now. It's quite tricky to count and talk at the same time. So band around your left foot, and again, you've got the options. You can do low ones, nice small circles. Remember to keep the legs straight, remember to keep the pelvis still and the other knee still. Little tiny circles, or have them higher if you want to. It's just what feels good to you. It doesn't really matter. I can make them bigger if they're higher, and again, watch the pelvis. The pelvis really wants to tilt. So circles in one direction and then back the other way. When we finish this, we will change to a different position. So I did promise that you could, if you couldn't get down onto the floor, you could do these on your bed. So these ones are probably absolutely fine on your bed. The next ones also are fine on your bed. So that's enough of that. I'm going to go on to my side. Actually, I'm going to keep the band. So again, if you haven't got a band, you can do exactly the same things without a band, not a problem. I'm going to use a band and I'm going to wrap it around my top foot. And we're going to do more or less exactly what we've just done, but on the side, so we're working slightly different muscles. So you can relax down on your arm. You can have a pillow or a cushion or whatever if you want to. I forgot to bring my block. I'm just going to use my arm. Your underneath knee is bent, your top leg is straight, your hips are stacked on top of each other. Imagine you've got a metal pole digging through you, pinning you to the floor so that your hips are not rolling back, they're staying straight. Your underneath knee is bent, and then you're going to tuck the band if you've got one underneath that bottom knee to keep it in place. It just makes it a bit tighter. You don't have to, you can do it like this, but then it's not quite as much resistance, so I like it like this. And it also holds it in place. So your body's nice and straight, your hips are stacked, your tummy's squeezed in, and you're going to lift and lower the legs. So exactly the same thing that we did on our back, just lifting and lowering the leg. So that leg's nice and straight. Again, this movement can be as big or as small as you want to. Often smaller repetitions are more effective. You can make it bigger if you want to, as long as your hips are not rolling. Now, I've got some options to make things harder. If you wanted to make this harder, angle your leg back a little bit behind you, so it's a bit of a diagonal, and already you'll find it working your glute muscle a little bit harder. If you then want to make it even harder, turn your toes down towards the floor, and that will kick into that muscle and make it a little bit harder. So the basic option is just your legs straight down and you're lifting and lowering. Back a little bit, toes pointed down is a bit harder. Take your pick how hard you want to work. There's absolutely loads of side lying exercises that you can do that really work your glute muscles, which really help to look after your hips. So I've probably done way too many of those, so have a rest if you've done enough. And then I'm going to do the circles. So again, same thing that we did on our back, circles. So nice straightforward circles, keep it nice and straight, and try to keep the pelvis nice and still. You're not letting anything else move, so your pelvis isn't moving and your back isn't arching. Everything's still. And again, to make it harder, take that leg back a little bit, so it's pointing behind you a little bit. I'm going to go back the other way now. And again, if you want to make it harder, toes pointed down towards the floor. As soon as you angle the toes down, you'll really notice the difference. I've tried to do all my exercises like this because it's much harder and more effective, so that you don't have to do that if it's too much for you. Okay, that is lovely. And then we're going to do one more exercise with the band here. And again, it doesn't matter if you haven't got the band. Take it out from underneath you. You are going to take your leg forward in front of you. Then you're going to lift it up. And bring it back down. And then take it back to where it started. So your leg goes forward. As you lift it up, try not to let the hips roll back. Bring it back down and bring it back to where it started. So when you're lifting it up, watch the hips. Watch the hips don't roll back. That's when the hips can roll. Also, of course, you haven't forgotten to lift up your pelvic floor and squeeze your tummy in. And you haven't forgotten to try and keep your back nice and still. You don't want your back to be arching and your pelvis to be tilting. Okay, I'm going to do one more of these and then we'll swap sides. If it all gets too much for you, have a little rest, come back to it later. No idea how many I've done, but you could be nice and, what's the word I'm looking for? Nice and strict with yourself and do the same on each side. 7 repetitions on each side would be helpful. Okay, so the other side, bandage around your top leg if you've got one. Relax down on this underneath arm or shoulder or a pillow. Underneath knees bent. Tuck the band underneath, both bits of the band underneath. And your top leg straight. Hips are stacked, you've got your metal pole digging through, pinning you to the floor. Tummy's tight, pelvic floor's lifted, you are lifting and lowering. So, not forgetting to breathe nice and deeply. Legs nice and straight, hips are stacked, they're not moving, they're not rolling back. And a harder option, you take the leg back a little bit. Harder option, turn the toes down a little bit. You will feel that. So, the other thing that you could do is to mix it up with these exercises. You could do it at different speeds. So you could do fast ones, little pulses like this, and you could do very slow ones. So there's all sorts of exciting alterations you can make to make it even more thrilling for you to work your hips. So that's probably enough of the single leg raise, the side leg raise. So then we'll do the circles. So keep the leg nice and straight. Don't let anything move above the hip. Keep squeezing in the tummy, don't forget to breathe, and leg back and toes angled down if you want to work harder. So I've got circles in one direction there, and then back the other way. Lovely. Towards the end I'm going to do another set of side lying exercises, the Oyster, which is one of my favourite exercises. We will have worked, if you do it all with me, you will have worked really, really hard on the hips, so good luck. Or you could do it in 2 sittings if you'd prefer to do that, entirely up to you. Okay, that's probably enough of that. Then take the band out from underneath. So this time your leg is going forward, you're taking it up towards the ceiling, bring it back down, and then take it back to where it started. So the leg goes forward. As you lift it up, don't let the hips roll back, keep the hips pinned to the floor, back down, and back to where you started. These ones you wouldn't want to do fast, you would only want to do these ones slower rather than faster, to make sure that you're not losing the control of the hips. But the other ones could be done faster or slower if you wanted to. Lovely. So hopefully you've done the same amount on one side as you've done on the other. And then we will change position and do something else really, really exciting. I'm going to do one more just for luck. There we go. Okay. All right, so we can get rid of the band for a minute. And we are going onto our all fours. Now, if you were doing it on a bed, depending on how sturdy your bed is, these ones might not work on a bed. Bear with me, the next bit after some of these exercises is lying down, again on your front. So, up to you. And of course, if you've got dodgy knees and it's not comfortable to be on all fours, then these ones are not going to be great for you, so you can have a rest or wait for the next bits. Okay, so I'm going to do, and we're going to be back to mobility again, and similar things to what we've done before. So we did a single leg slide, so I'm just going to do a single leg slide. So I'm sliding the leg back and bringing it back. My knees are hip distance apart, so you're nice and balanced. Hands are underneath your shoulders. Your tummy's lifted, you're thinking about lifting up your tummy, not letting it sag down. And you're doing this nice and slowly. You want to try and keep the pelvis still and flat. So I just wanted to show you that in every different position you can do some nice mobility exercises as well as some nice strengthening exercises. So this is nice and easy, just sliding the foot away and sliding it back. That's all there is to it. So then on our backs we did a single knee fold, so we can do something similar here, again just to get everything moving. So just bringing the knee in towards the chest and relax it back down. So it's a single knee fold. Just adapted it to do it on all fours instead of lying down. You could choose which ways to do it works for you. So that's the single leg slide, single knee fold. Okay, and then on our backs we did a hip jog, which was taking the knee out to the side. So you could do that, just lift the knee up to the side. I can remember when I was very, very young, when I used to like doing aerobics, they used to do an exercise like this where you lifted your leg up, and it was, I can't remember what it was called, but we always thought it was like a dog lifting its leg up a lamppost. So, but we don't have to be that uncouth. I don't really know what I would call it. I don't know what this exercise is called. But maybe a hip opener. That's what we'll call it, a hip opener. So you're lifting up your tummy, you're trying not to move the pelvis, you're just getting mobility in those joints. And again, if your movement is very, very small, that's okay. It doesn't matter if your movement needs to be this small, that's fine. As long as you are moving it and working on the mobility, then that is great. Okay, then I'm going to do circles. So pretty tricky in this position, but I'm going to do hip circles. So let's see if I can work out one way. Hip circles going inwards. I'm going to do the other way around so I don't forget, and hip circles going outwards. Breathing nice and deeply. If you've got dodgy wrists, obviously you don't want to stay down in this position for too long, so be careful. And then I'll do the other side. So we've got circles going one way. So these are just nice mobility exercises on all fours if you fancy them. And then back the other way. All very, very similar stuff to what we've done before. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to try something with the next one, and and see if it works. So I'm going to try and add in the band, and we're going to try and do the same exercises that we did lying down, that's my head, with a band. It might not work with a band, let's give it a go. So I'm going to put the band underneath my right foot, and then I'm going to hold it on the floor here. Now you might need quite a long band. If the band's not as long as mine, it might not work. So give it a try if you want to, or you can just do it without. Yeah, my band is very long, so if your band is not this long, it might not work. So I'm going to do a single leg raise. I'm going to do it with my foot flexed to make sure that the band doesn't pop off and hit me. So I'm just lifting and lowering that leg. You need to hold on to the band quite tight. Single leg raise. So do the same thing that you did on your front, but obviously you're then working different muscles. You're working your glutes more and your hamstrings and the back of your legs. So that's a single leg raise. Ooh, that's quite hard. I think it would probably be nicer. Yeah, nicer without the band. But I'm just trying to work hard. So swap sides with your band. Bandage around your left foot. Hold onto it nice and tight. Give up if it doesn't work. Foot flex, don't forget, because I don't want it to smack me. Smack me. If you've got dodgy wrists, it might be more comfortable to have fists. Oops, a daisy. There we go. Very, very tricky. Okay, let's try again. Yes, it might be more comfortable to have your hands in fists rather than flat on the floor. So that can be quite painful for your wrists. So just do what works for you. Anything that hurts and doesn't feel great, doesn't feel good for you, then don't do it. So this is a single leg raise. You can really, really feel it working your glute muscles. I can feel it on both sides with the band. The other one I'm going to do is, no, I was going to do circles, but I think I'm going to give that one a miss. But you could do circles if you wanted to, so circles like that. I'm not going to do that one. And the other one I'm going to do is similar, but with the knees bent. So I'm going to have my fists on the floor now, so my wrists are starting to go a little bit. So you're going to have the knee bent, and you're just going to lift and lower. So again, this is working your glute muscles, your buttocks. Try to keep the pelvic floor lifted, try to keep the tummy squeezed in. This could be done with nice little pulses, little tiny little movements. That works well with this one. Squeeze, you could do this with your foot flex, might be nicer. You can always play about with positionings of your foot. Often if you just change the position of your foot or the angle of your leg, it makes it harder or easier. That is enough for me. Other side. Knees hip distance apart, knees bent, lifting and lowering. Yeah, I like it with the foot flex. Quite nice. Really, really working the hamstrings and the glutes quite hard now. And of course, these are the muscles that you need to work to strengthen if you've got any issues with your hips. Also, if you had any back problems, often back problems transfer into your hips. So, or down your legs. So, working the glutes is a really, really good idea if you've got back problems. Lovely. Okay, that will do. So, I'm going to now lie on my front, and I'm going to do a few here. This is long, isn't it? I hope you're still with me. I hope I've lost you. So I'm going to lie on my front. Now, this one isn't great if you've got dodgy knees, so be careful if you've got dodgy knees, but do it very, very gently or miss it out. You can relax down onto your hands or have your arms in whatever position is comfortable. This is a single leg kick. So all I'm going to do is just bring the foot up towards my bottom, bring my heel up towards my bottom, and then the other one. So I'm going to do it nice and gently, just working the front of your thigh, your quad muscles. You could do it with a pulse. If it's comfortable and you haven't got dodgy knees, you could do it with a pulse, like that. But you don't have to, you can just do it nice and gently, like that. Don't forget, when you're lying down, to try and keep your tummy squeezed in. It's quite difficult when you're lying on top of it. And don't forget to breathe. You could also do this with a foot flexed, if you wanted to. And you're trying to keep your pelvis still. And of course your shoulders are relaxed down away from your ears. So that's a single leg kick, working more of the front of your leg. Then I'm going to do swimming legs. So swimming legs is basically a single leg raise, but you're on your front. So all you're going to do is lift up one leg and then lift up the other leg. So before you even do it, you need to be thinking that your shoulders are relaxed, your tummy is tight, you're tightening up your tummy, trying to lift it off the floor. Also your glutes are nice and tight. And then your thighs nice and tight, you're lengthening away. Better to breathe in to prepare and breathe out as you lengthen the leg away. Try to keep the leg nice and straight. So the movement is coming from your hips, you're working the whole of the leg and you're working the glutes. If it's uncomfortable on your lower back, then please stop and don't do it. If it's niggling here, then don't do it. If it's comfortable, then you can do lovely swimming legs here. Lengthening the leg away. And of course, if you wanted to work harder, you could do repetitions in one leg. Make sure the tummy's nice and tight. And repetitions on the other leg. You could do as many as you wanted if it's comfortable. Very, very nice. Okay, that might do for now. Okay, so just to finish that bit off, I'm just going to sit back onto my heels and have a stretch. Stretch the back out, this will work the back with that one, or have a cat stretch, arch your back up, and have a cat stretch. And then I'm going to do the other sideline one. So, if you've had enough, pause it, come back to it later. So this is the Oyster, one of my favourite exercises. Again, you'll relax down on this arm or shoulder or on a pillow. This is a lovely one to do on your bed. It works perfectly well on your bed. Your knees are bent up nice and high. Again, your hips are stacked. You've got your metal pole digging through. Just keep the tummy squeezed in. Feet are together. All you're going to do is lift and lower this top knee. So this is very, very easy. Lovely Oyster exercise. It also can be called the Clam, which you can see why. Oyster or a Clam. So it's very, very easy to let the hips roll back. Don't let that happen. Keep the hips stacked in a nice straight line. You can, of course, have a rest whenever you want to. You can do this as slowly as you like. The slower you do it, the harder it's going to be. And then that's the first little bit of the sequence I'm going to do. The second bit I'm going to do today is with the feet lifted. So both feet are lifted and then you're doing the same thing, lifting and lowering the knee. As I said, there's all sorts of variations that you can do on side lying exercises. So we never run out of ideas really. There was far too much to put into one workout, but I thought I'd give you a treat as a nice long one to really, really work, as lots of people were keen on doing hip work. Okay, so that's with your feet lifted, same thing. I'm doing it reasonably fast. You could slow it right down, do it much slower if you wanted to. It would really, really get into the glutes there. Beautiful. And then the last little one I'm going to do is you're going to have your knees together and your feet apart, and then your feet together and your knees apart. Knees together, feet apart. Feet together, knees apart. So you're keeping your tummy squeezed in nice and tight. You're keeping your pelvic floor lifted. You're keeping your hips stacked in a nice straight line. You are breathing nice and deeply. And you will find that you are starting to hurt here. This is quite hard work. And of course, there's always ways to make these things harder. I've got very, very thick bands that you can put around your thighs, which makes this an awful lot harder. It's called an activation band. If anybody wants any information about those, let me know, because that really makes everything work harder when you're doing stuff like this. Lovely, that's probably enough of that, isn't it? So let's do the other side. Oh. The problem I find with these sideline ones is you do one side and then you swap sides and you've got to lie on the hip that you've just worked and it is already painful. So you can always do something else in the middle, in between, to relax it a little bit. So relax down on this underneath arm, knees up nice and high, hips are stacked. You're lifting and lowering this knee. So your tummy's squeezed in, your pelvic floor's lifted, you're keeping your hips stacked. When I say keep your hips stacked, imagine that you are up against a brick wall so your hips can't roll back because they're stuck against it, or that you're on the edge of a cliff and if you let them roll you're going to topple over the edge. So you can think about that if you need help keeping your hips stacked. And again, if your knee doesn't lift up as high as mine, depending on how much flexibility you've got, mobility you've got in your hip joint, that's fine. Little ones are still hard work. So we've done that first one. The second one is that your feet are lifted and you're lifting and lowering that knee. Keeping the tummy squeezed in. Oh, lovely. It's amazing how long you can go on doing exercises for the hips, isn't it? It's quite long. It's quite a lot to do. And there's loads more I could have put in, but I'm just putting the best ones in today. So then, when you finish doing that, you've got your knees together and your feet apart, your feet together and your knees apart, knees together, feet apart, feet together, knees apart. Breathing nice and deeply, tummy squeezed in, hips are staying stacked. Beautiful. So that's your second set of side lying exercises. I'm just going to finish off with a few on your back, and then we're nearly there. So that's enough of that. I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a shoulder bridge. So you're on your back in your nice neutral position that we started in. You can bring your feet in quite close to your bottom, knees are hip distance apart, shoulders are relaxed, pelvis nice and flat. I'm going to do the pelvic tilts that we did at the beginning, so you're just tilting your pelvis forwards and backwards, and then all you're going to do is you're going to make that movement bigger. So I'm going to breathe in, and then as you breathe out, peeling the tailbone up off of the floor and lifting up your spine. Breathe in at the top. As you breathe out, relax your spine back down. So you're thinking about peeling your spine off the floor, one vertebra at a time, and then curling it back down one vertebra at a time. You are thinking about squeezing in your tummy. You're thinking about keeping your pelvis nice and still, not letting it wobble around. Your knees are nice and still as well. The slower you can do this, the better. You're also thinking that your spine is coming up off of the floor nice and symmetrically, so both sides, the muscles on both sides of your spine are coming up at the same time, so you're not wobbly, you're not uneven. Tummy is squeezed in and it's nice and smooth and controlled, so this will be working your glutes in and also your hamstrings. So we've really done quite a good job of working all the muscles that are surrounding your hips. And then you can make this a little bit harder by doing a little pulse at the top. So squeeze the tummy, you're going to tighten up the glutes. Little pulse there. Nice deep breathing. Knees are still, pelvis is flat. If it pulls on your back, then come back down and come back up again. And again, there's other things that you could do to make this harder, but I'm not going to do any more today because we've already done loads, and I think that is enough for today. So that's quite enough. Okay, that's lovely. I'm just going to finish off very, very quickly with a little bit of a stretch. We've really worked the glutes hard, so I'm going to do a glute stretch. My favourite stretch, feet are flat on the floor, cross one leg over, put your ankle on your thigh, take this knee out as much as you can, that is comfortable for you. Squeeze your tummy in and lift up this knee and hold onto the other leg if you can. You will feel the stretch down here. If you've worked really hard with me, if you've done all those exercises, you really need to stretch out the glutes. And the glute stretch is an exercise, a stretch that I do every single day, and I do it in bed before I get up, and it really helps to prevent backache. So if you've got any back issues, any hip issues, it's a really good idea to do a glute stretch. Of course, it's a good idea to work them as well first and then stretch them, but even so, it's a really good idea to do the stretch. So I'm holding this for quite a while because we've worked quite hard. So then the other side, feet flat on the floor, cross the leg over, ankles on your thigh, turn this knee out if you can. Obviously, if it's uncomfortable, then don't, just do what works for you. Squeeze the tummy in and lift up this leg and hold on to it. And you'll feel the stretch down the other side. Make sure that you're breathing nice and deeply when you do your stretches, not holding your breath. Lovely. Okay, so we've also worked on our hamstrings quite hard, so I'm going to do a quick hamstring stretch. If you've got your band, wrap the band around your right foot. If you haven't got a band, you can just hold on to your leg. So with no band, just hold on to your leg wherever you can. If you've got a band, it makes it easier. So you're going to have this leg straight up. Now if you can only have it here, wherever, that's fine. I'm, again, quite bendy, so my leg can come in quite far. But you have it at the position that's comfortable for you. Try to keep it straight. So wherever that may be for you, you're aiming to get stretched down the back of your thigh here, your hamstring muscles. You can bend and straighten in that position, bend and straighten, and also quite a nice stretch if you point and flex your feet. Oh, there's the real stretch when you flex, point and flex your feet. Oh, I could do lots of other things as well, but I'll save that for another day when I'm doing a big stretch. So I am going to relax back down and just do the other leg, otherwise we'll be here all night. I could do 15 minutes of stretch for you, but you probably want to get on. So your hamstring stretch, have the leg wherever it's comfortable and it's straight. Bring it as close towards you as it can be, being straight, and then just bend and straighten it. Bend and straighten it, and then point and flex and point and flex. That is a really, really nice stretch. So another time we'll do even more of a stretch if you wanted to do that. Okay, I'm going to just leave it there, I think, because I think we've done enough now. So, but basically the hamstring stretch and the glute stretch were the really, really important ones because it really worked those muscles quite hard. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that. I don't know if it was too much for you. I don't normally do them this long, although I do tend to do longer sessions in the group for you guys. So let me know, send me some messages, let me know how you found it. If you want to do it in 2 goes, or if you did it all in 1 go, then fantastic. But it doesn't matter, whatever works for you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining me. So for anybody, and if you know anybody that's got limited mobility, Friday's class will be seated. I'll be doing nice, gentle, seated hip exercises for anybody that has got more limited mobility or wants to just something nice and gentle. It'll be much more gentle than this one today. This one's quite tough. So join me if you can, or if you know anyone that it would suit, then let them know. I will see you then, or I will see you next week. Have a lovely rest of your week. Thank you very much. Bye bye.